A man named Tom Coleman, an undercover narcotics officer who arrested 46 people, nearly all of them black, on charges of being cocaine dealers and sent many of them to prison for a total of 750 years. So who is Tom Coleman? He's a former rodeo cowboy with a spotty record in law enforcement and no experience as an undercover narcotics agent. Nevertheless, he was hired by the local sheriff in 1998 to root out drug dealers in Tulia, a desolate farm town of some 5,000 people which has fallen on hard economic times. The money to hire Coleman came from the U.S. Department of Justice as part of a $500 million effort to fight the war on drugs in rural America. Coleman, posing as a menacing ex-convict with a taste for drugs, infiltrated Tulia's small black community, reporting to his bosses that he had bought more than a half a pound of cocaine during his 18-month investigation.
There was a drug problem in Tulia, and there still is a drug. They're selling drugs right now. I guarantee you they are.
Early one morning in 1999, Tom Coleman's efforts culminated in the arrest of 13% of Tulia's adult black population and charged with selling cocaine to Tom Coleman at various times over the course of his investigation. The town newspaper declared Tulia's streets cleared of garbage. One of those arrested was 26-year-old Freddie Brookins, Jr., a former high school star athlete with no criminal record. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison.
It was just a roundup. A West Texas roundup, that's all it was.
33-year-old Yule Bryant, a sales clerk, was charged with selling $160 worth of cocaine.
I was stealing my boxers. They told me where I was going. I didn't need no clothes.
Billy Wafer, a 45-year-old warehouse foreman, was charged with dealing 2.3 grams of cocaine to Tom Coleman.
They wanted to be on the map by arresting so many and making this the biggest drug bust that they ever had, whether it was done right or wrong.
Why was nearly everyone you arrested black?
It's just where the road led me.
It may be no coincidence that the road led Tom Coleman to the town's black community. It was well known that he had used racial slurs in front of his superior officers in Tulia.
Everybody's making a big deal. Oh, God, he said words like, oh, let's put him in an electric chair. Well, yeah, the word was bad back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and 50s, and 60s, and 70s. But now it's just a common slang.
You consider yourself to be a racist?
No, sir.
Do you see how some people might hear what you say and think that you are a racist and that you simply railroaded dozens of people because of their race?
That's been said, yes, sir. But that wasn't the case.
What was the case was that the first defendants to face justice were quickly convicted in 8 separate trials by nearly all white juries. Only one of the jurors was black.
I believe they already had a guilty verdict before any of us even went to court.
They were all given harsh sentences ranging from 20 to 341 years in prison, even though the arrests had turned up no cocaine, no drug paraphernalia, no weapons, no money, or any other signs of drug dealing. The convictions were based solely on the uncorroborated word of Tom Coleman. Just for the record, did you wear a wire or other recording device?
No, sir.
Did you have any video or photographic evidence that the buys took place?
No, sir.
Did you have any independent eyewitness testimony from another undercover officer?
No, sir.
Did you have any fingerprint evidence?
No, sir.
The only records he made of the supposed drug buys were notes of the names, dates, and places which he scrawled on his leg. On your leg?
Yes, sir.
Why not on a notepad?
Because if I wrote it on a notepad and I left it laying around somewhere, somebody would have found it.
One of the harshest sentences of all, 90 years, went to Joe Moore, a 60-year-old hog farmer who has lived much of his life in this one-room shack. Authorities described him as the drug kingpin of Tulia.
I didn't even know nothing about a kingpin. I don't even know how a kingpin lives.
Tom Coleman's great success at securing convictions came despite the fact that some of his cases fell apart, like the one against defendant Billy Wafer, who had his case dismissed when he was able to show with time cards that he was at work at the local seed processing plant at the same time that Coleman testified Wafer was selling him cocaine.
It never happened. He's that good of a liar that he convinced the DA and the sheriff that really happened.
Defendant Yul Bryan had witnesses who said he was at a fair 50 miles away at the time Coleman said he sold him drugs. And that's not all.
In my police report, he said I was a tall black man with bushy-type hair. I'm 5'7". I haven't had any hair in like 6-7 years. Wasn't me.
Case dismissed. And then there's the case of Tanya White. Coleman says she sold him $190 worth of cocaine in Tulia on October 9th, 1998 at 10:15 a.m.
That's not possible because I was at the bank in Oklahoma City at 9:45, withdrawing $8.
All I know is she was in Tulia selling me dope on that day.
But how could she be at the bank cashing a check at the same time?
If I wanted to, I could deposit a check in your bank account without you being there.
No, but this has her signature on it, and it was an assisted transaction. So that means that she had to deal with the teller who was there.
Mm-hmm.
So this record is not good enough for you?
No, it's not good enough for me.
It was good enough to get the case against Tanya White dismissed. But her three siblings, Donnie, Crimmy, and Kizzy, a young mother of two, were not so fortunate. They had already been sentenced to a total of 99 years in prison. Elaine Jones, head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, spearheaded the effort to free the Tulia defendants.
How do 46 drug dealers function in a community of 5,000 people? What's the client base? The market isn't there. Who are 46 drug dealers selling drugs to?
He insists to this day that no matter what anyone says, those defendants in Tulia are guilty.
The defendants in Tulia are guilty of being black and of living in Tulia. That's what they're guilty of.
The jurors in the Tulia trials never heard what Tom Coleman's superiors knew about his checkered background when they hired him. Police officers he had formerly worked for said he needed constant supervision and had possible mental problems, and that he had abruptly walked off a previous job, leaving behind $7,000 in unpaid debts, prompting the sheriff in that town to warn that Mr. Coleman should not be in law enforcement. What's more, in the middle of Coleman's undercover investigation in Tulia, the man who hired him, the sheriff, arrested him on charges of stealing from a county where he had previously worked. Yet he was permitted to continue his undercover operation in Tulia. How did it all go so wrong?
It's an indictment of the war on drugs. It's the way the war on drugs is being fought. Washington is passing out money, and nobody's supervising how it's being spent, applying the standards to these undercover operations.
The U.S. Justice Department has spent billions of dollars over the years funding drug task forces in small towns like Tulia. The more arrests and convictions a task force makes, the more money it receives the following year, which can be used in virtually any way it sees fit. In 1999, Tom Coleman was rewarded for his efforts in Tulia. The Attorney General of Texas named him Outstanding Officer of the Year. But just 6 months ago, Coleman was called upon to defend his conduct before a state judge who was hearing appeals from some of those convicted in the Tulia sting. He said that your testimony was, quote, absolutely riddled with perjury, that you were entirely unbelievable under oath, and that you are, quote, the most devious, non-responsive law enforcement witness this court has witnessed in 25 years on the bench in Texas.
A lot of the juries during the trials, they spoke their verdict. And that was a lot of juries, and that's just one judge.
But that one judge on one day this past summer set the Tulia defendants free. Among them were Joe Moore, Kizzy White, and Freddie Brookins Jr. As for Tom Coleman, he was recently indicted for perjury. He's also under investigation by the FBI for possible civil rights violations. How has this affected you?
It's been hard, but I'm proud of what I did in Tulia.